It's time now for one more thing. Greg.
All right, Saturday. That's tomorrow, 10 p.m., the Greg Gutfeld Show. We have Sebastian Gorka. Sebastian Gorka, Terry Shopper, Kat Tibbs, and Tyrus. That's how he talks, by the way. And I haven't done one of these in a while. I hate these people. Boy, I'm in a mood. You know, in the physical world, we have stuff called litter. You know what litter is?
Right.
In the social network world, that's GIFs or GIFs. I don't care what you call it. You can argue all you want. But video memes of celebrities shrugging or dancing rather than responding, sending these GIFs or GIFs. They're the internet litter. They're internet garbage. They're dumb. They're thoughtless, and they're careless and lazy, and they're messy. So I anticipate you will be sending me a lot today.
So now I know why your next 48 hours is going to be
sent it to him. He should.
I like some of them.
I can't stand them. They're litter. They're actually litter on the internet.
Look, the
garbage.
Entire Twitter.
It's like throwing things away.
All of Twitter is.
I think
Good point, Dana.
I think because he's a little hungover today. He's a little cranky pants.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Cranky pants.
All right, KG, you're next.
Mine is actually quite good and not disruptive or negative like Greg's. Okay, 9-year-old cheerleader Michaela Lang got the shock of her life right before she took off for a national cheerleading competition because her father, as Sergeant First Class Robert Lang, is stationed halfway across the world serving in the National Guard. So when the father of her teammate performed a really cool, funny, hilarious cheer routine, her dad was unable to join them, right, physically in person. However, where there is a will, there is God's way, because shortly after the dads finished their routine, guess what? Her father appeared on screen with a routine of his own with his military unit in the Middle East. So she couldn't even believe her eyes, and through her tears said it probably took him a month to learn it.
Oh, God,
good for you.
So
God bless her father for his service.
Awesome, absolutely. All right, this is something that will not be a problem for Greg or for me, but it could be a problem for the rest of you. As if airplane seats weren't small enough, JetBlue has just announced they're going to decrease leg room. That's right. To make room for new seats with bigger TV screens, they'll take away 2 inches of crucial leg room for the coach class.
Ouch.
JetBlue previously led other airlines with their leg space at 34 inches, but now they're sacrificing for the TV screen.
That's terrible.
What do you think of that,
I'm
Graham?
6'2". That hurts. That's painful.
Well, you'll be 6 foot before you know it. All right, Juan.
Yeah, me too.
You guys remember the movie Hidden Figures? It featured 3 mathematicians, black women, who helped NASA put John Glenn into orbit in 1963. Well, 3 high school girls in D.C. look like they're following in those footsteps. They're among 8 finalists for NASA's prestigious high school science competition. The girls, all 17 and juniors, use NASA technology to purify water coming from school water fountains with possible lead contamination. The winners will be announced this month. Top prize, $4,000 stipend and a trip to NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. Good luck.
All right, Jason.
That was pretty cool. Spanish Fork, Utah, which is pretty close to my home, Christopher Rudd was appearing before a judge. Now, when you appear before the judge, he's actually sitting in some handcuffs there. And if we should show some video, it's really going to help what I have to share, because he decides to get up and leave. He goes out the door. The Utah County Sheriff starts to go after him, and this idiot goes over the top. He purposely jumps over. The sheriff deputy actually tries to catch him. He breaks his pelvis, he breaks his leg, he breaks his skull in doing it, and he has actually earned the idiot of the moment for getting up, running, and purposely jumping off the second floor.
Don't do that.
And thanks to those sheriff deputies, they didn't have to go to try to...
He broke his pelvis?
You don't want to break a pelvis. Of all the bones, breaking a pelvis ain't the one you want.
Why do you say that?
I had a friend.
Oh.
Hey, we have time for an extra
question?
Facebook. Maureen B asks, what would you be doing right now if you weren't on the 5?
I know what you'd be doing.
What?
Crushing Pinot Noir.
Well, that's probably true.
Yeah.
How about you? You'd be doing it with me.
Wow.
Okay, Fantasy Island.
If I were on the 5 right now,
Yes.
I'd be on my way to meet Peter so we could have our weekend.
There you
the
go.
dog. Yeah,
Oh,
Jason?
that's sweet.
I can't wait for it to be 6 o'clock because I'm dashing to the airport so I get home and then go golfing.
How's your leg room on that plane?
Exactly.
Delta's pretty good. Yeah.
You know, the weather's great.
Yeah.
So I'd be outside because right now it's like, I think spring was, it's beyond. It's like we didn't have spring. It's like we went to summer.
Yeah, we jumped ahead. Mine would probably be
you know
saute
what
and
I would
cheese
do?
snack.
What?
What I did this morning, I spent an hour cleaning out my closet. And I was good to, if you need me to come over and get rid of stuff,
Otherwise known as a
I'm in a mood.
matchbox.
You're going to come up to my office, Dan. I got to do spring cleaning.
I'm very good at throwing things away if you want to bring me over.
She has no clutter, and she like
no clutter. I have no emotional attachment. That might explain a lot.
There's a therapist.
All right.
Waiting in the hallway.
Have a great weekend, everyone. Special report is up next. John Roberts is in for Bret. John, you and I are seeing a little bit too much of each other.
Yeah, well, we'll get people talking, but that's okay. Thanks, Dana.
Bye-bye.
President Trump walks back Rudy Giuliani's statements, preaches to the choir at the NRA's annual convention, and has a date and location set for his meeting with Kim Jong-un. But he isn't sharing yet. This is Special Report. And good evening. Welcome to Washington. I'm John Robertson for Bret Baier this Friday evening. President Trump took the time to speak with reporters today a number of times. He both praised and corrected his newest lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, on the Stormy Daniels payment and says he wants to speak to special counsel Robert Mueller. But it was a Virginia judge who earned the most attention from the commander-in-chief over his statements about the Russia investigation. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is here with the latest, and wow, what a bombshell this one was.
It was quite a day, John, and thank you. With the Virginia judge questioning the legitimacy of the special counsel investigation into former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, President Trump seized on the news today to discredit the entire Russia probe.
All we hear about is this phony Russia witch hunt. That's all we hear about.
Speaking to the NRA in Texas, President Trump went off topic, citing a Virginia court hearing about his former campaign chairman Paul Manafort, who faces tax fraud and money laundering charges.
Just when I'm walking on the stage, a highly respected judge in Virginia made statements. It says, Wall Street Journal, it says, judge questions Mueller's authority to prosecute Manafort.
Federal Judge T.S. Ellis rebuked special counsel Robert Mueller's team, suggesting they lied about the scope of the investigation. You don't really care about Mr. Manafort's bank fraud, Judge Ellis said. You really care about what information Mr. Manafort can give you to lead you to Mr. Trump and an impeachment or prosecution.
How does this have anything to do with the campaign, the judge asked. Let me tell you, folks, we're all fighting battles, but I love fighting these battles. It's really a disgrace. What's happening to our country is a disgrace.
Before heading to Texas, the president took reporters' questions twice, emphasizing that no one wants to talk to Mueller more than he does.
I want to talk to the people in charge if they can prove that it's a fair situation.
At the same time, the president claimed the special counsel legal team is stacked against him.
The problem we have is that you have 13 people, they're all Democrats, and they're real Democrats, they're angry Democrats, and that's not a fair situation.
President Trump also praised Rudy Giuliani, adding the new member of his legal team is on a learning curve.
He started yesterday. He'll get his facts straight.
That appears to be a reference to Giuliani's Fox interviews, where he said President Trump paid lawyer Michael Cohen a retainer, and the money covered Stormy Daniels' non-disclosure agreement.
Funneled through a law firm, and the president repaid it. Oh, I didn't know he did. Yeah.
Before the president took the podium in Texas, Giuliani released a clarifying statement. First, there's no campaign violation. Second, my references to timing were not describing my understanding of the president's knowledge, but instead my understanding of these matters. Third, it is undisputed that the president's dismissal of former Director Comey was clearly within his Article II power. Throughout the day, President Trump singled out the media after two networks incorrectly reported Trump attorney Michael Cohen's calls were listened to by the feds. The president urged reporters to revisit Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's memo that recommended FBI Director Comey's termination, the catalyst for the special counsel appointment.
Just read it. Put it in the air. Your viewers don't know about it.
Rosenstein said today the long-awaited Inspector General's review of the FBI and Justice Department's handling of the Clinton emails should come in the next few weeks. Sources close to the matter told Fox News the Inspector General's team has continued to receive and pursue new leads, John.
Some other news late this afternoon, a newly released version of the Republican House Intelligence Committee report with less black ink.
Yeah, and the key thing here is a section about former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. In the unredacted testimony, you see that both Director Comey and his deputy, Andrew McCabe, testified to the committee that they did not see, their agents did not see evidence of deception when they interviewed Michael Flynn about his conversations with the Russian ambassador. So the question is, how did they get from that, no deception, to a guilty plea for lying with the special counsel? And we've got to call into the special counsel tonight to ask if there was new evidence that caused them to bring that case against Flynn based on what we've now seen in this House report.
All right, keep watching that. Catherine Harris, thanks so much. President Trump is on his way back to the White House this evening after spending this afternoon in Texas speaking to the NRA convention. It was a speech that could have been given by candidate Trump, and the friendly crowd loved it. Correspondent Kevin Corke was in the room and reports tonight from Dallas.
Before I left today, a couple of people came up to me, good political people. They said, you know, going to the NRA convention and speaking today, that'll be very controversial. It might not be popular. You know what I said? Bye-bye, got to get on the plane.
It was a campaign-style rally with a familiar feel, a little politics, news of the day, and like his three previous speeches to the National Rifle Association, a heavy emphasis on the right to bear arms.
We will never give up our freedom. Americans are born free. We will live free. And we will die free.
But the president's fourth address to the powerful pro-gun group comes amid increasingly polarized attitudes about guns across the country, particularly in the wake of a spate of mass shootings in Las Vegas, at a church community in Texas, and just 2 months ago, the horror that struck Parkland, Florida, and left 17 people dead. A tragedy that spawned dozens of March for Our Lives events across the country. In the wake of that shooting, the president challenged lawmakers to stand up to the gun lobby, and he said he'd do the same.
These are great people. These are great patriots. They love our country. But that doesn't mean we have to agree on everything. It doesn't make sense that I have to wait till I'm 21 to get a handgun, but I can get this weapon at 18.
We didn't address it, Mr. President. Look, I think
you know why? Because you're afraid of the NRA, right?
While it's true, the president followed up by hosting several listening sessions, proposed a ban on bump stocks, raising the age limit to buy a gun to 21, even advocated for universal background checks. Today, much to the dismay of some Democratic lawmakers, it was a much different tone. Long on sizzle, but short on solutions.
The NRA always likes to talk about freedom. No one is talking about taking away the freedom of gun owners, but we have to remember the freedom of the 17 kids, the 14 students, the teachers that were gunned down at Stoneman Douglas. Their freedom matters too.
John, let me tell you this. Vice President Mike Pence also delivered a rousing address to the gathering here. In fact, he, the president, and just about every other major speaker, imploring the gathering to be sure to vote this summer, this fall in 2018, or risk the Democrats taking control of Congress and ultimately losing their gun rights forever. John?
Kevin Corke at the NRA convention in Dallas for us tonight. Kevin, thanks. Football coach Bill Belichick and retired pitcher Mariano Rivera headline the list of names to be appointed to President Trump's Council on Sports and Fitness and Nutrition. Other members include gold medal winning beach volleyball star Misty May Traynor and Herschel Walker, who played on Trump's New Jersey Generals team in the short-lived United States Football League. In February, the president signed an executive order directing the council to focus on encouraging children to play sports. The face-to-face meeting between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump is a historic idea well into the planning process, and it sounds like some of the details are being nailed down. Senior Foreign Affairs correspondent Greg Palcott reports from London on the where and when of the talks.
The upcoming historic summit involving North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and President Trump is coming into focus. The date and venue apparently has been worked out.
We are in constant contact with North Korea We've actually worked out a time and a place which will be announced shortly.
One possibility for the location is the site of last week's meeting between Kim and South Korean President Moon Jae-in, the DMZ, between North and South Korea. The president suggested that preference earlier this week, also mentioning Singapore. As for the timing, reports still say it could be the end of this month or early June. Meanwhile, more hopeful words about the fate of the 3 American citizens held by North Korea. The Korean Americans, a businessman, and 2 academics could be released shortly.
A lot of things have already happened with respect to the hostages, and I think you're going to see very good things. As I said yesterday, stay tuned.
This, as a New York Times report claimed, the president had asked the Pentagon to look at reducing the number of U.S. troops in South Korea. Defense officials called the report false. National Security Advisor Bolton, nonsense.
I don't believe that we will do anything in South Korea related to the defense of our allies or the security of the region.
Still, Trump did say at some point in the future he'd look at cutting forces to save money. Ahead of the summit, many urge caution amid new reports of assurances from North Korea they will denuclearize.
After what I think will be a visibly successful summit between the president and President Kim Jong-un of North Korea, the real test won't come until weeks, months, and even years after that, when we see if North Korea is once again lying and deceiving the way they've always done in the past.
Another report from the region claims those 3 American detainees could be released as soon as Saturday. The possible venue for that transfer? The DMZ. John.
Greg Pellicott in London for us tonight. Greg, thanks. A good way to finish the week for Wall Street. The Dow jumped 332. The S&P 500 gained 34. The NASDAQ rose 121. Today, though, could not erase all of the week's losses. The Dow finished the week down 1/5 of a percentage point. The S&P 500 dropped 1/4%, but the NASDAQ was up 1 1/4. The first Friday of every month means the release of employment data, and the unemployment rate has dropped to a rate not seen in more than 17 years. Correspondent Peter Ducey is at the White House, where the president was happy to tout the job numbers.
The unemployment rate is now the lowest it's been this millennium, 3.9%.
The big thing to me was cracking 4. That hasn't been done in a long time.
164,000 jobs were added last month, even though investors and business owners are holding their breath to see what winds up happening with tariffs.
Now I think really they're waiting to see what's going to happen on trade, because we're going to have some incredible trade deals announced.
Traveling in China today for negotiations with Chinese counterparts, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin offered optimism. But a Bush-era congressional budget director says this is, quote, the wrong way to get to 3.9% unemployment. Douglas Holtz-Eakin writes that, quote, the decline in the unemployment rate was solely because the labor force fell by 236,000 and labor force participation dipped to 62.8%. Then there are the Democrats who claim that when good economic news comes, the thanks should be to Obama.
If you think about what the economy was like when President Obama took office, and we were losing 750,000 jobs a month, and under his watch the unemployment rate dropped in half, and it's encouraging to see that we're continuing to make progress.
Trump's economic team prefers to highlight the fine print in this report, like black unemployment, now down to its lowest point since the early 70s, 6.6%.
The black unemployment rate, which we've been talking about being at the lowest ever, went down again. The Hispanic unemployment rate is the lowest ever, and even for teens and females, it's the lowest we've seen since 2000. And so there's a heck of a lot of good news in this report.
Something else in the jobs report today, a 2.6% boost to hourly pay compared to this time last year. But the payment to Stormy Daniels was all that most reporters asked the president about, and that was eating away at him in Dallas.
So we have the best employment numbers we've virtually ever had. And yet, all we hear about is this phony Russia witch hunt. That's all we hear about.
When I asked President Trump this morning about the jobs report, he stressed that he wants to negotiate those better trade deals with China. And he says that the only reason that the U.S. and China are playing so nice right now is because he has such great respect for President Xi. John?
Peter Ducey at the White House tonight. Peter, thanks. Complicating President Trump's Far East policy is China's military buildup in the South China Sea. Correspondent Jillian Turner reports from the State Department tonight on the dangerous situation that is only getting worse.
The Chinese government is ramping up its activities in the South China Sea as the nuclear situation in North Korea dominates the region's attention.
We've raised concerns directly with the Chinese about this, and there will be near-term and long-term consequences.
In recent weeks, the military installed new equipment, anti-aircraft and anti-ship missiles, as well as jamming systems on 3 separate islands in disputed territory off its coast. Jurisdiction over these island clusters in the South China Sea is hugely contentious.
There are at least 5 claimants to a variety of these islands: Vietnam, Malaysia, Philippines, China, and Taiwan. Also, Brunei has a claim.
China's construction of bases on these islands has been underway since 2014, and the landscape today, as shown in satellite images, is drastically altered because of it. The U.S. position has always been that China's claims to these islands are invalid, and any military installations violate international law. The Trump administration's made this issue a centerpiece of its foreign policy towards China, the president himself keeping the issue front and center in his engagements with President Xi. But with China's latest bold moves to militarize the islands, some experts are beginning to question whether this issue can be resolved diplomatically.
There's a limit to what the U.S. or any country can do, because China is pretty clearly now signaling that it's prepared to use force.
$5.3 trillion of trade passes through the South China Sea. It's one of the world's busiest waterways and serves as the region's energy transit hub. Experts explain China's seeking a chokehold on these island territories in order to hedge against the United States. John?
Jillian Turner at the State Department tonight. Jillian, thanks so much. Up next, a member of President Trump's National Security Council joins me in the studio to discuss China policy as well as North Korea and Iran. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 2 in St. Louis, where later this month, Missouri lawmakers will convene the first special session in the state's history to consider impeaching Republican Governor Eric Greitens following allegations of sexual misconduct and misuse of charity resources for his political campaign. All top Republican and Democratic legislative leaders have called on Greitens to resign, which he refuses to do. Fox 32 in Chicago, where an ATF agent was shot in the face on the south side of the Windy City. The agent was working a federal investigation with city police officers and is expected to make a full recovery. And this is a live look at Honolulu, Hawaii from Fox 2. The big story there, well, not in Honolulu, but the Big Island, is an early morning volcanic eruption forcing more than 1,000 residents to evacuate. The Big Island volcano sent molten lava snaking through the forest and bubbling up on paved streets. The governor has deployed the National Guard to help with the emergency response. Officials cannot predict how long the eruption may last. Incredible, though. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back. With the potential of a North Korea summit and the ongoing trade negotiations with China, the Far East region is an important one for the Trump administration. Victoria Coates sits on the President's National Security Council and is here now to discuss the region and what else is going on around the world. Good to see you.
Always good to see you, John.
As far as North Korea goes, the President talked about it on his way down to the NRA convention in Dallas. Let's listen to what he said.
We're having very substantive talks with North Korea. And a lot of things have already happened with respect to the hostages. And I think you're going to see very good things. Also, the trip is being scheduled. We now have a date and we have a location. We'll be announcing it.
President announcing there, Victoria, that he's got a date and a location. So let me see if I can get you in trouble right off the top here. Where and when?
Moscow. No, I think that's for the president to announce. Obviously, as a staff, we've been working very hard on his direction to get this organized, and we're making good progress.
The president has said he would like to have it at Peace House in Panmunjom. I'm being told by some people at the White House that that's all well and good, but logistically might be a little difficult.
I think pretty much every location is logistically challenging. That has its own unique set of circumstances. Nothing's off the table, nothing's on the table. It'll be his announcement to make.
How soon do you think we'll hear about that?
I think we'll hear sooner rather than later.
What is the U.S. doing to ensure that this isn't just another ploy by the latest in successive Kim regimes to play the United States?
Well, we're actually just trying to learn from history that we've seen a number of very well-intentioned attempts to engage the North Korean regime, but we haven't gotten to the place we've wanted to. issue. And so the president has started by laying a very clear strategic goal, denuclearization, which is a terrible word, but that is what he wants to achieve. And he's made that clear up front, that's non-negotiable, and we're going to work back from there. The other thing he said today I thought was very important was that our troops in South Korea rather, are not something he's willing to bargain with.
Right, well, let me ask you about that. And if you think nuclearization is hard to say, try to say politicization. That's the really tough one. But let me ask you about the troops. The New York Times this morning said that the president has asked the Pentagon for options about drawing down the number of U.S. troops there. The White House pushed back on that. John Bolton pushed back and said that's not true. But if North and South Korea sign a peace agreement and North Korea starts to take steps toward denuclearization, is there still a reason to have 28,500 U.S. troops?
We'll have to see what that looks like, and we'll have to get to that point. I think that's a very important step that we would, the president said at Andrews, I think, today, that he wants to get there, but he's not going to bargain over the troops right now. He wants to get to his strategic goal, have his comfort that the security of the United States is taken care of, and then he'll consider anything like that. But that's in the future. That's not something we're looking at now.
The president has said that the goal here, and not just the goal, but that the deal has to be denuclearization. Obviously, that's his opening bid. Is there any way that he would take anything less than total and complete denuclearization? I
really don't think so. We need to get that program dismantled. What we've seen in recent months from the North Koreans is a real sea change, a real shift in attitude. It's been very encouraging on a number of fronts, but now we need to see a material manifestation of that. Yes, we want to join the international community. We don't need these weapons. That's what we need to see.
We talked about this offline in terms of the chronology. The next big thing coming up is the May 12th decision about whether or not to renew the waivers of sanctions against Iran or pull out of the JCPOA. Right. Which way is that going to go?
Well, the president has been pretty clear about how bad he thinks this deal is, but on Monday we learned from the Prime Minister of Israel that it may well be worse.
How much did that change the calculation?
That has been a very important factor. The Prime Minister said that he did share that information with the president when he visited in March, and so this is something we've had an indication of for a while. We didn't have all of the details. Our people have been working through it as well as the Israelis. We certainly have not gone through all of it. It's a huge translation lift, but what we've seen we deem to be authentic, and it's deeply troubling. Whether they lied and we didn't know about it, or we kind of knew it was the case and went into the deal anyway, it was based on a lie, and that's not something I think that's sustainable.
A couple of big issues on China. Our trade delegation, just on the way back from China, the U.S. made demands to lower the U.S.-China trade deficit by $200 billion over 2 years. The Chinese came back with a set of demands. It sounds on the surface like it didn't go very well.
Well, we've got to raise these issues. The vital thing is you have a president who's willing to work with China, who has a strong working relationship with President Xi, but who's also willing to say, look, this is intolerable. The intellectual property issue is something we're very upset about, and we're going to have a series of difficult discussions. And part of the problem is no one's been having these discussions for a couple of decades with the Chinese, and they've gotten into a certain mindset, and it may take some time to change. But I wouldn't say it didn't go well. I would say it was a productive working discussion.
One other big issue with China is China now putting missiles in the South China Sea on the islands that it has basically built, and the U.S. saying that it doesn't like that. What is the U.S. willing to do to get those missiles out of the South China Sea?
This has been another enormous problem that was not addressed as it was developing. So we inherit a South China Sea with a whole series of archipelagos, that's another good word, that China is militarizing, and that's not something that we or our allies in the region are very enthusiastic about.
Well, what's the U.S. prepared to do?
Well, I think we're prepared to start pushing back strongly, which hasn't happened before, and then we'll see what the Chinese are willing to do. I'm not going to predict some sort of dramatic military action, but they know that we're serious.
Victoria Coates, always great to see you. Thanks for dropping by.
Thank you, John.
Have a good weekend.
You too.
Coming up, the All-Star panel breaks down President Trump's statement that Rudy Giuliani misspoke. But up next, our Whatever Happened To series continues with a look at a local Kentucky official who shot to fame over same-sex marriage. Another aide is leaving Scott Pruitt's Environmental Protection Agency, the fourth high-level exit in 2 weeks. The Deputy Associate Administrator for Public Affairs joins Pruitt's top spokesperson, his security chief, and his Superfund administrator on the departure list. Pruitt faces a series of federal investigations and audits over high spending. Pruitt has blamed subordinates for the problem. Google is strengthening the vetting process for purchasing political ads, requiring a government-issued ID along with other key information. The internet giant will require buyers to disclose who is paying for the advertisement. The company did not offer details on how the ID verification would work for online ad buys and hopes the system will be in place this summer. It has been nearly 3 years since Kim Davis, a county clerk in rural Kentucky, caused a nationwide uproar when she refused to sign gay marriage licenses because of her religious beliefs. The move made her a household name and a galvanizing figure in the debate over same-sex marriage. This week, correspondent Matt Finn updates us on whatever happened to Kim Davis.
Tucked away in the rolling hills of Moorhead, Kentucky, today, Kim Davis is back to her routine, somewhat quiet daily life as the Rowan County clerk.
With this ring, I thee wed. I thee wed.
Back in 2015, shortly after a landmark Supreme Court case made gay marriage legal, Davis became a target for some and an icon to others when she refused to issue same-sex marriage licenses, arguing it violated her Christian beliefs.
My face, my life, my past was smashed everywhere, not just here, not just in our country, but all over the place, all over the world.
Under whose authority are you not issuing licenses?
It began when a same-sex couple recorded this video of Davis refusing to issue their marriage license. The video went viral.
I got death threats.
Davis didn't budge and ended up in jail for contempt of court. Davis was released after 5 days into the arms of then presidential candidate Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee.
I never envisioned anything like this. You know, I had in my mind I was going to retire with my mother and I was going to live an easy life. And that's what I wanted to do. But, you know, the Lord had something else in store for me.
Because of Davis, Kentucky marriage licenses were eventually altered so that county clerks don't have to sign them. The mother of 3 recently wrote a book about her experience and is now running for re-election. And in November, the person she may face is none other than David Ermold.
And these people are cruel to do this to us.
One of the men in that viral video.
You can take a stand and you can still have compassion and you can have respect. And that is what we're going to do. We're going to change the face of politics in Kentucky.
David Ermold returned to the county clerk's office, but this time, Davis processed his application to run for office. Davis says she has no regrets.
If I could go back and be given this chance all over again, I would not waver. I would do the exact same thing.
In the name of standing up for what she believes in, Kim Davis went to jail and ended up keeping her job. Now, one of the Democratic candidates trying to take it from her is getting offers of help from Hollywood and once again shining the national spotlight here on Moorhead, Kentucky. Matt Finn, Fox News.
Lawmakers in Kansas and Oklahoma passed legislation to grant legal protections to faith-based adoption agencies that refuse to place children in LGBT homes. Both bills are on the way to the respective Republican state governors. Kansas Governor Jeff Collier supports the bill. In Oklahoma, Mary Fallin has yet to announce a position. Supporters argue the measures protect the right of adoption agencies to follow their religious beliefs. Critics call the bill taxpayer-funded discrimination. Up next, the all-star panel joins me to discuss President Trump praising and correcting Rudy Giuliani. First, beyond our borders tonight, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has issued an apology over a speech that global leaders called anti-Semitic. Abbas said it was the Jews' social function, including money lending, which caused animosity toward them in Europe, and described the creation of Israel as a European colonial project. The remarks were sharply condemned by the United Nations, European Union, and United States as perpetuating anti-Semitic stereotypes and falsifying history. The Nobel Prize in Literature will not be awarded this year. The Swedish Academy says the decision was made because the group is in no shape to pick a winner after a string of sex abuse allegations and financial crime scandals. The 2018 prize will be awarded next year. It will be the first time since 1949 that the prestigious award has been delayed. More than 100 people are dead following a powerful dust storm and thunderstorms in India. Workers are trying to restore power after extensive damage to electrical poles and transformers. Hundreds of homes are gone and livestock and crops have been damaged. The situation is expected to get worse as another dust storm is expected to develop this weekend. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back.
Rudy is a great guy, but he just started a day ago. But he really has his heart into it. He's working hard. He's learning the subject matter. And he's going to be issuing a statement, too. So Rudy knows it's a witch hunt. He started yesterday. He'll get his facts straight.
President Trump on his way to Dallas today talking about Rudy Giuliani, offering him praise and a little bit of a correction as well. Let's bring in our panel now. Charles Hurd, opinion editor for the Washington Times, Susan Page, the Washington bureau chief at USA Today, and Jason Riley, Wall Street Journal columnist and senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. So we got that clarifying statement from Rudy Giuliani not long after the president spoke. In part, Giuliani said, there is no campaign violation. The payment was made to resolve a personal and false allegation in order to protect the president's family. It would have been done in any event, whether he was a candidate or not. Giuliani seeming to be walking back or clarifying the statement he made on Fox yesterday, where he said, imagine if all that had come out in the last debate with Hillary Clinton, what would have happened?
Ironically, Giuliani was brought in to help speed along the Mueller investigation, wrap this thing up quickly. He might have just extended it. I don't think it was a slip of the tongue. I think it was a strategy. They seem to be walking it back a little bit right now. But politically, what it has ensured is wall-to-wall coverage of the president and the porn star through the weekend and beyond, perhaps. And that's a problem politically. We're not talking about these great job figures. I mean, the lowest, some of the lowest unemployment numbers in the post-World War II era, John. And nobody's talking about that. And unemployment across the board, women, minorities, teenagers. And we're not talking about that. And I think if you're a Republican out there, particularly a Republican up for re-election, this is not what you want to be talking about.
We were talking about the Russia investigation earlier in the week because there seemed to be new momentum around it, Susan, but this just kicked it into an orbit somewhere past Jupiter.
And, I would disagree that Giuliani was brought in to bring the Mueller investigation to more of a conclusion. I think he was brought in to change the kind of campaign against it that the White House has been waging. I think Ty Cobb had a view that you dealt with the investigation. You tried to cooperate, you agreed to testify, and the Giuliani approach seems to be, let's fight it in the streets. Let's fight it not in the courtroom. Let's fight it out on cable TV and in public opinion. I think they are laying the groundwork for, if there is a very negative report by the special counsel, if there's even an indictment, that they're going to try to undermine the credibility of the FBI, of the courts, of the investigation.
And I spoke to Rudy about this at midnight on Wednesday after he made the comments. I said, well, why did you do this? Did you have some reasonable expectation that prosecutors who raided Michael Cohen's home have evidence that payments were made? And he said, well, no, because nobody knows what was seized from Michael Cohen's office. But Cohen knows. Exactly. You got to wonder if they got bank records. There's got to be some record of these payments, Charles.
Yeah, and obviously, politically speaking, it is sort of a firestorm right now. But we're not talking about politics here. I think that what we're talking about here is legally, and clearing that up from a legal standpoint was very important for the president and the president's team.
And you think this clears it up?
The fact that he to file the proper FEC documentation, that is a good thing for the president. But I also think that it suggests that at least the best information the president has is that the best information, the best case they have against him is an FEC violation. Is this case? And if that's the best that Mueller has against the president, that's not that bad.
But there was that little detail of, okay, so you were paying Michael Cohen a retainer. Did you know where the retainer was going? And the president, on the way to Dallas today, kind of gave us a little insight into it. Let's listen.
Well, you're going to find out because, we're going to give a full list and people know. And virtually everything said has been said incorrectly, and it's been said wrong, or it's been covered wrong by the press.
So do you have to make a leap of faith, Jason, to think that the president's giving all of this money to Michael Cohen and not getting any kind of itemized bill?
I think that the president is taking his supporters for granted to some extent here. He said he knew nothing about these payments. He was very clear about that. His daughter was out there defending him on that. Sarah Sanders was out there defending him on that. And now that has changed. And I'm worried that people need to be able to trust their president on the big stuff, North Korea, Iran, and so forth. And he's showing them, he's questioning whether he should be trusted on things like this. That's a problem.
Does this hurt him in terms of trust?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Wall Street Journal's been pretty supportive of President Trump. The Wall Street Journal ran an editorial this morning that was critical on the question of whether he's leaving people to not be able to believe what he's telling them.
Let me just quickly, in the time that we have left, jump into another issue. It's in the same vein, though. Virginia Judge T.S. Ellis, in the Manafort case, today excoriated the prosecution for bringing him the case, basically saying we said that this was what the investigation was about, but we are not bound by it, and we were lying. Come on, man. He basically is saying to Mueller, why are you bringing me this case? This goes so far outside of the bounds of your jurisdiction.
That was a pretty amazing development today, because already you have sort of the obviously the executive branch is not pleased with this investigation. You have powerful people in the legislative branch not pleased with this investigation, and now you have the judicial branch. The guy actually accused the prosecutors of going too far, and their response to this was that, well, we have these secret powers that are laid out in this document, but we can't let you have what. And he says, no, I want to see what the parameters are. It's a very tough situation. The prosecutor is.
This document is.
But that's why this really goes back to Rod Rosenstein, right? Mueller is taking advantage of whatever rope Rosenstein has given him to expand this investigation, and the buck is supposed to stop with Rosenstein. And so I agree. The Mueller's power is not unfettered, but if you want to blame someone here, it should be Rosenstein for letting this get as broad as it's gotten.
Susan, the president took great comfort from what Judge Ellis was saying today. Does this blow a hole in Mueller's case if a federal judge is saying, I don't understand why you're doing this case from 2006. What does this have to do with the Russia investigation?
Well, let's see what happens next. It should give Americans some comfort, Americans of all stripes, that we have a separation of powers. We have independent power centers, including the judiciary, that's going to take a look at things. And so whatever happens next, I think it is a good thing when the institutions of American government are willing to stand up to each other, whatever the final outcome might be.
Well, that sure happened today. Yeah. Stay right where you are, panel. We'll be right back with the Friday Lightning Round. Stay with us.
In allowing highly trained teachers to carry concealed weapons. And we want highly trained security guards. These teachers, they love their students, and they're not going to let anybody hurt their students. But you have to give them a chance.
President Trump at the NRA convention in Dallas this afternoon, in a speech again supporting the idea of arming teachers to keep schools safe. It seems, Charles, that in the wake of the Parkland shooting just outside of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the president was somewhat at odds with the NRA over a couple of issues and was chastising people like Pat Toomey, saying, you're afraid of the NRA, and yet the president's in lockstep with them again.
Yeah. I took that more as an attack on politicians than I did any real wavering on his support for the Second Amendment. I took it as being sort of a shot at the lobbyists. And, most gun owners in America, they don't think of themselves as being lobbyists, and they certainly don't associate so much with lobbyists. But they do care about the Second Amendment. Mm-hmm. And what we saw today was he clearly came back in full-throated support of the Second Amendment.
I didn't mean to say that he was challenging the Second Amendment, but certainly he seemed to be cutting against the grain historian of the NRA, and some of the proposals, background checks, banning bump stocks, that sort of thing.
Raising the legal age for purchase to 21.
Yeah, I mean, that was the one in particular.
He also said we should seize the guns now and deal with the Second Amendment implications later. That is certainly something that caused some pause for NRA members. But what we saw here today was that the transformation that some people thought they were seeing in the political landscape after the Parkland shootings, not there.
Is it too dangerous for him to go up against the NRA?
I don't think he's in danger of losing the NRA. This is the base of his base.
They sure seem to love him.
They do love him, and I think they're going to be there for him. What this speech was really about, I think, is making sure they turn out in November, even though he's not on the ticket. There is an enthusiasm gap out there. We've seen it come up in some of these special elections, and Republicans are worried that the base may not turn out if Trump isn't on the ticket. This was about emphasizing how important it is for them to go out there in November.
Another big issue that we're dealing with is North Korea. The president saying that the time and the place, Charles, has been set for his meeting with Kim Jong-un. This is beginning to look very real.
Yeah, it really is. And I do think that the president, we saw this down in Dallas, where he's in campaign mode, he's hilarious, he's unpredictable, all the things that people that like him like about him. But it's also, you know, he's talking about these big issues. And if you remember back to the campaign, there were all these scandals, all this stuff that people were all up in arms about. But at the end of the day, he kept going back to those issues. And when he is comparing all the Stormy Daniels stuff with peace on the Korean Peninsula, or standing up to China, or talking about the economy, his supporters, they hear that and they love it, and it's also part of his shtick for beating the crap out of the press, because they keep talking about Stormy Daniels, right, and he's able to blame all that, blame all that on them.
Well, I mean, that is a story, but you'll notice that we had Victoria Coates from the NSC in to talk about North Korea on this program. Do you believe, Susan, that this actually will happen? I
do believe that this is actually going to happen. Can you imagine if 6 months ago we would have said that Little Rocket Man was going to meet with Donald Trump, and that there was a serious possibility of reaching some kind of historic agreement? This is really a remarkable development. But yes, I think it sounds like there will be a meeting. We don't know what the outcome of it will be, but this is historic.
At the same time, we've seen a lot of this before. We've seen hostages released before. We've seen communiques promising peace before. We've seen declarations before. I think Trump needs to go into this meeting prepared to walk out of this meeting.
I mean, he said that.
And that is very encouraging when we hear him say, if I don't get verifiable concessions of denuclearization, I'm out of here.
All right,
that's very comforting.
It's Friday, which means winners and losers. Susan, you want to start us off?
My winner, Ichiro Suzuki, amazing ball player, retired this week from the Seattle Mariners, or at least moving to the back office, not off the playing field. What a player and what a classy guy. Mm-hmm. And my loser, fans of the handlebar mustache, because they have lost Ty Cobb. No public figure in modern times has worn more proudly.
This Ty Cobb has nothing to do with baseball.
Yeah, that's right. And worn more proudly a handlebar mustache than Ty Cobb, and their only consolation can be the brush mustache that John Bolton is now wearing at the White House.
We've traded one stash for another. Jason?
My winner of the week are the teachers unions, who scored yet another victory in Arizona with another Republican governor caving to their demands. I think these stoppages, these disruptions are going to continue until the politicians stand up to the unions and explain to the public that more money is not the answer. My loser is Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, who had the gumption this week to attack Congress for actually doing its job and requesting these documents. Congress is a co-equal branch of government. That's exactly what they should be doing.
Charles? Winner is U.S. economy below unemployment below 4% for the first time in 17 years. Loser is NBC for having to correct that blockbuster story about Feds wiretapping Michael Cohen's phones.
Nobody shows Rudy Giuliani. Why? Too obvious?
I think Trump will take care of that.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, panel, very much. Good to see you. Have a great weekend. When we come back, this week's best quotes on camera.